Selamat malam dan selamat datang ke rangkaian kuliah daring penjelajahan menuju arsitektur Indonesia tahun 2020. Kami ucapkan terima kasih atas kehadiran Bapak, Ibu, Saudara-saudari. Kami bangga dan bahagia menerima kehadiran Anda sekalian. Acara ini adalah bagian pertama dari rangkaian kuliah daring yang diselenggarakan oleh Lembaga Sejarah Arsitektur Indonesia dan Universitas Katolik Parahyangan. Acara ini juga akan direkam dan live streaming melalui channel YouTube Penjelajahan Menuju Arsitektur Indonesia. Rangkaian acara pada malam hari ini akan diawali dengan sambutan oleh Bapak Dr. Alwin Suryono selaku Ketua Pusat Studi Arsitektur Universitas Katolik Parahyangan dan Bapak Sutrisno Murtioso selaku Ketua Lembaga Sejarah Arsitektur Indonesia. Kemudian dilanjutkan dengan sajian dari pembicara utama yaitu Bapak Robert Cowherd dengan judul Decolonizing Building Cultures in the Anthropocene. Sesudahnya ditanggapi oleh Ibu Indah Widyastuti dan terakhir tanya jawab yang akan dipandu oleh Bapak Gunawan Cahyono. Pertanyaan dapat disampaikan menggunakan fasilitas chat Zoom dan bagi yang mengikuti melalui YouTube Live dapat menggunakan fasilitas live chat YouTube. Pertanyaan mohon dilengkapi dengan nama. Kuliah pada malam hari ini akan diberikan dalam bahasa Inggris. Namun, pertanyaan dapat disampaikan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Bagi peserta yang membutuhkan sertifikat, dapat mengisi Google Form yang tertera pada Zoom chat ini. Terima kasih. Demikian, langsung saja kami mengundang Bapak Dr. Alwin Suryono selaku Ketua Pusat Studi Arsitektur Universitas Katolik Parahyangan dan Bapak Sutrisno Murtioso selaku Ketua Lembaga Sejarah Arsitektur Indonesia. Silakan.
Selamat sore. Yang saya hormati Profesor Robert Cowherd, pembicara pada hari pertama ini. Yang saya hormati Profesor Gunawan Cahyono, yang bersedia menjadi pemandu acara ini. Yang saya hormati Dr. Indah Widyastuti sebagai penyangga acara ini. Yang saya hormati teman-teman panitia dari Lembaga Sejarah Arsitektur Indonesia. Yang saya hormati teman-teman dan adik-adik panitia dari Arsitektur Unpar. Yang saya hormati hadirin Bapak-Bapak Ibu sekalian dari berbagai penjuru tanah air. Idealnya kita berseminar di dalam ruang yang cukup representatif untuk bersama mencermati sejarah Indonesia yang kita cintai. Namun semua yang sudah lama direncanakan ini harus disesuaikan dengan situasi prihatin yang cukup panjang. Walau demikian, semua ini tidak boleh mengurangi rasa syukur kita pada kebersamaan melakukan penjelajahan menuju arsitektur Indonesia. Ada baiknya kita sambut hangat sambutan dari para pemuka agama dan tokoh-tokoh budaya agar menjadikan momentum musibah pandemi ini sebagai sebuah kebangkitan baru untuk melakukan pemantapan arsitektur Indonesia. Seminar penjelajahan menuju arsitektur Indonesia ini sejalan dengan visi Unpar, yaitu mengembangkan potensi lokal hingga ke tataran global demi peningkatan martabat manusia. Inilah saatnya kita membenahi diri secara arif terhadap nilai, pandangan, dan sikap di bidang arsitektur. Selamat berseminar. Semoga seminar ini dapat bermanfaat bagi kita semua dan juga bagi bangsa Indonesia. Terima kasih. Salam Om Santi 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 Om. Namo Buddhaya. Salam kebajikan.
Terima kasih. Selamat malam atas kehadiran rekan-rekan semua. Thank you and welcome to all of you. Particularly, we are honored by Professor Gordon Dominic, who's already here just for this event. Thank you very much. And I'll use bahasa Indonesia afterwards, after this. Di luar dugaan, peminat yang tadinya diperhitungkan hanya 100 orang, ternyata yang mendaftar hampir mencapai 500 orang. Jadi mohon maaf kalau ada beberapa kesulitan, terutama tadi kami mendapat kesulitan pada mail server kami, sehingga mungkin ada beberapa yang terluput dari daftar pengiriman. Tetapi jika itu yang terjadi, mungkin bisa diberitahukan bahwa mereka yang tidak hadir hari ini bisa mengikuti acara ini di channel YouTube. Rangkaian kuliah ini diadakan sebenarnya untuk memperingati ulang tahun ke-31 Lembaga Sejarah Arsitektur Indonesia, dan kesempatan ini anggap adalah waktu yang tepat untuk mempersembahkan sumbangan bagi arsitektur Indonesia yang kita cintai ini, khususnya dari sudut pandang sejarawan. Juga pada kesempatan pertama ini, kami menganggap perlu untuk memperoleh pandangan dari luar Indonesia, karena biasanya tetangga yang baik akan punya gambaran yang lebih menyeluruh dan objektif tentang rumah kita. Jadi kami berharap para tetangga-tetangga yang baik hati itu bisa menyampaikan pandangannya kepada kita semua. Saya rasa itu saja. Semoga rangkaian kuliah daring Lembaga Sejarah Arsitektur Indonesia ini bisa memperkaya khasanah wacana arsitektur Indonesia. Sekali lagi, terima kasih dan silakan menikmati acara ini. Silakan.
Terima kasih Bapak Dr. Alwin Suyono dan Bapak Sutrisno Murtioso. Berikutnya kami mempersilahkan Bapak Gunawan Cahyono. Silakan, Pak.
Selamat malam semua rekan-rekan saya. Saya Gunawan Cahyono. Saya mendapat kehormatan untuk menelaras acara ini. Nah, yang akan Anda dengar nanti ada dua pembicara. Sebetulnya bukan pembicara, pemberi kuliah ya. Yang pertama adalah Robert Cowherd. Beliau adalah seorang profesor yang sekarang menjabat di Wentworth Institute of Technology. Saya kira saya nggak akan berpanjang-panjang karena sekarang sudah eranya internet. Anda bisa cari tahu tentang dia. Tapi yang paling penting saya perkenalkan, beliau adalah pencinta nasi liwet. Dan beliau sangat mencintai Indonesia juga. Bisa dilihat dari nanti sosoknya yang memakai batik hari ini. Yang kedua adalah Indah Widyastuti, seorang dokter yang sekarang dosen di Institut Teknologi Bandung. Dan saya kira juga Anda bisa mencari tahu tentang beliau lebih jauh dari internet. Banyak sekali karya beliau, kalau nggak salah beliau ini langsung pindah. Tadi ada acara ya Pak Bu Indah. Jadi ini sangat beruntung dalam era yang bisa memasuk ke namanya online ini, kita bertemu dengan dua tokoh ini. Dan saya sekarang persembahkan Robert Cowherd. Beliau akan menyajikan dalam bahasa Inggris, tetapi beliau tuh sangat menguasai bahasa Indonesia. Cuman kalau sekarang sudah cukup lama meninggalkan Indonesia, lalu lebih baik dia sampaikan dalam bahasa Inggris, tapi nanti Anda bisa menyampaikan pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia ke beliau. Silakan Bob, ini sekarang waktunya Anda dulu. Habis itu nanti Ibu Indah.
Joseph Pudutomo, Iwan Sudrajat, Indah Indrawati, dan lain-lain. Thank you so much for the opportunity to make this presentation of many new ideas that are just coming up in my research. So I ask forgiveness for giving the presentation in English. And if you hear some sounds in the background, that's just trying to keep me on time, as there's a lot to present. So the topic that I've chosen grows out of my recent research on the Anthropocene and bamboo, and my parallel passion for decolonizing education, decolonizing the culture of architecture. And so these themes come together. I'm trying to weave these themes together in this lecture. So let's see if I can get everything to work. The key question at the core that is driving this research is that given the challenges of the Anthropocene, given the challenges of multiple overlapping global crises in the 21st century, what alternatives to the global nation state extractive capitalism offer more favorable outcomes? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different outcome, is what Albert Einstein told us. So I will attempt to cover some of these thoughts and this evidence in 5 sections. The first section is a look at a very rich example of a complex adaptive system. We are told that with global climate change and so many challenges, that what we need to respond are an alternative to these rigid systems of modernity of the welfare state. What we need is a more agile response, perhaps powered in part by the power of computation and the information age. So that's a core question as we look at the Subak.
It was hoped that techniques developed in...
So in the 1980s, Green Revolution rice production was scientifically transformed by creating new strains of rice, new fertilizers, new techniques. And throughout the world, these techniques were brought to different agricultural geographies and geologies to see if poverty alleviation and food production could be advanced. The surprise in Bali, it worked in many places, but the surprise outcome in Bali was after a few years of apparent success, things started to suddenly deteriorate. There were record-breaking insect infestations, soil fertility dropped, and water scarcity caused great plant stress. And it was quickly abandoned in the mid-1980s. And they went back to the traditional systems in which the Hindu Balinese religion was a central part of the common resource management strategies of rice cultivation. In one of the most densely populated locations in the world, it turned out that the Subak irrigation system was a very finely tuned, sophisticated, complex management strategy that had been hidden in the shadows. Stephen Lansing's very famous work studying the Subak system, in the 1980s and 90s, he was there in Bali when this all happened. And he partnered with a computer scientist to try to create a sophisticated computer model to replicate the system behavior of the Subak and try to figure out why it did such a great job at outperforming the computer and the technocratic, scientifically based green revolution systems. And what came out of that research is a profound appreciation for how this religious, social, geological, agricultural system was able to respond in real time without being directed by some all-seeing technocrat making decisions. Instead, it was a self-regulating system. And this characteristic of system behavior is something that I will refer to in the final portion of this presentation as reflexive system behavior. It is reflexive in that it is self-regulating, somewhat automatic. Once you design the system self-regulates automatically, and it acts on itself to constantly upgrade and revise the system itself. And this apparently is something that computers do not do well. And Stephen Lansing has followed up this research with a recent book from 2019 called Islands of Order, where he is doing something very similar to what I am doing in this talk, which is attempting to understand the complexity of systems that existed long before the computer, and systems that actually outperform even the most sophisticated computer models that we can come up with today. So the second part, I'm not sure if Sambatan is a familiar term, but I know that Gotong Royong is a familiar term. Sambatan, I'm looking over at my gallery view and looking for indications from those few of you who have video on. Is Sambatan a familiar term out there? Well, Sambatan, so we'll look at this. When the Europeans arrived, and it's important to recognize it wasn't just the Dutch, but it was also the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, the French, the British, all would, no matter who dominated at any given time, there was a common mission, and I use that word deliberately, a mission to elevate the morality of the populations of Southeast Asia, but also to impose a sense of modern progress, health and hygiene. And those twin concerns resulted in first coercion to outlaw longhouses because it was immoral for multiple families to sleep under one roof, but also to outlaw bamboo and thatch and other organic materials that were felt to be a problem when it comes to rat infestation and disease. When Berlage visited Indonesia in 1931, he sketched scenes like this out of a romantic sense that these were the last days of any sign of anything that existed before the emergence of modern industrial culture. And so one of the unintended consequences of banning these organic materials was, for all intents and purposes, a displacement of the Sambatan gift economy system that was simultaneously a system for producing villages, the physical village. If someone needed a house, the village would get together and build the house. Every family in the village, every household unit would go into the surrounding forest, harvest the materials necessary, craft those materials into different elements of the house, and then put it in place in a building day or building week in which the family receiving the house would feed everyone. And so this was, it was very similar to what we in North America and Europe understand as the building societies that were prominent in England several centuries ago. But the key thing is everyone grew up knowing how to harvest these materials and how to make these elements. Now, what happened is that with the banning of thatch and bamboo, it forced people to shift to building production that required special skills. It required bringing lumber from far distances. And the main thing that it required was cash. It required an exchange medium that really had profound unintended consequences for these social institutions of constant renewal of the connections between people, the constant renewal of the status and the sense of belonging and the place within the village social structure. And so to this, we move on to ethnoarchaeology and the availability of understandings that may be thought to have been erased, displaced, or otherwise just extinct. So an interesting thing happened back in the 80s when the Green Revolution collapse happened in Bali. Around that same time, there were teams of archaeologists working in Thailand and in Cambodia, and they were excavating canal systems for the first time around their sites and speculating about the possibility that the religious temple structure, the hierarchy and the rituals might have some connection to managing scarce common resources and keeping social harmony between what would otherwise be competing actors struggling to get more water than the other, as we would expect in an extractive capitalism situation. And so when these archaeologists heard what was happening in Bali, they suddenly had access to a living culture, a population of priests and village officials who were actually enacting these rituals of water management through the Hindu-Balinese system. And so they went to Bali and they discovered that they had a model. They could study this model and use that as a thought experiment, not to assume that it was the same everywhere, but to test out their theories. They would at least have some thought experiments that they could run. And it turns out that in 2002, there was a sudden awareness of societies on the margins. The book by James C. Scott, Seeing Like a State, was followed up by this book, The Art of Not Being Governed, in which he looks at mainland Southeast Asia as a place where hundreds, if not thousands, of distinct groups are not simply left over untransformed by modernity, but who deliberately escaped the lowland rice cultures of the Han Chinese and others in order to find refuge in the highland hills. And if we look at the island archipelago of Southeast Asia, we see a similar thing with this rich diversity of cultures that might actually have some of these complex adaptive systems still at work. I think I should acknowledge that several of you in the audience have contributed to these materials. Professor Dominig Gunawan and others. A lot of what I'm showing here comes out of the Archipelago Press Indonesian Encyclopedia of Culture. And we see a lot of these materials have implications for form. But given my time, I'm going to breeze over some of these. But you see that in some of these cultures that are still have these building cultures intact, that there's a richness of form that comes out of the use of these materials. There's a parallel body of research about Henri McLean-Ponce's struggle with an understanding of some of these deflected forms, his lifelong struggle that was triggered in part by his design for the Bandung Institute of Technology. And so we move on to the fourth topic, which now is the Anthropocene. And I'm not sure how common this term is right now. My colleagues still struggle with even how to pronounce it. There's the British Anthropocene, and then there's the more North American pronunciation, Anthropocene. Take your pick. And but the important thing is, what does it mean? And so, and what is driving the Anthropocene? Basically, Anthropocene is the epoch of human impact on the planet, where the largest force, the most determinative force of global transformation is the human species, thus the anthropo. And the hardest thing about this is, what is driving the Anthropocene? This is challenging in that we take for granted that human progress marches on as a natural instinct to move into a better world. And so the forces that are driving this specific kind of progress that is characteristic of the forces of the Anthropocene are actually very, very special forces. In 1993, when I was living in Solo, working at the Kraton, Surakarta, I went for a long bicycle ride on my Sepeda Kerbau out to Solo Baru, just to see what was happening out there. And I found a very eerie landscape of fully finished houses that were quite empty. And wandering around in this setting, I asked someone I met, when are people going to move in? And he patiently explained to me that these properties were investments that the family he worked for had 2 children, so they bought 2 houses. And upon when it came time for them to get married and their children to get married, they would sell the house and use the proceeds to finance the wedding and establish that family. They would not move into the house, they would sell the house. So property was being used not for the use of people, but as an investment. And that led to my 2000 dissertation research at MIT, where I looked at the cultural construction of Jakarta in the late Suharto period, New Order period, and looked at how the invention of a real estate market released vast fortunes of speculative capital. And it was driven by the banking system that was looking for a way to diversify and to accumulate wealth beyond what was possible before a land market existed. And so many of these buildings were built, sold, but not occupied throughout the 90s and up to the crash. And I wrote a piece in 2002 with my co-author at USC, Eric Heikkila, speculating that Southern California real estate practices were what was driving the aesthetic and design forces And very shortly after that, I don't know if they read our piece or not, but sure enough, Orange County, Java became a reality. And an understanding of the role of land markets is essential to understanding the miraculous transformation of China in the subsequent decades. That the development of China is driven not just on their manufacturing systems and their low-cost labor, but also on a similar process of taking land that really only had use value. The price of the land was based on its agricultural productivity or its value as a place to live. But then they discovered the magic of real estate markets and speculation and the exchange value, as Marx would have it, of the land, and released that vast fortune in what was, for all intents and purposes, a deliberate real estate bubble. And as long as the bubble doesn't burst, we're doing great. And some of this resulted in what has famously been documented as the ghost cities of China, that the land gets developed, the land gets built, but it does not get occupied. It is a situation in which if a hectare of land is worth $1 as agricultural land, it suddenly becomes worth $100 per hectare, and then $1,000, and then $10,000. And these vast fortunes are released not really through speculative sales. And this phenomenon has really stretched across the planet. London has been famously studied, and the term necrotecture, necro meaning dead architecture. These luxury buildings are built, they are sold, and the lights in the upper floors remain dark at night because no one lives there. The London research, they looked at utility bills and found which units were being occupied and which units were not being occupied. They could tell by the electricity meter. And in New York City, the New York Times did this study of how shell companies are being used to purchase real estate without disclosing the name of the people who are actually purchasing these units. It is believed that a lot of this is money laundering from drug trafficking or even the Revolutionary Guard in Iran. Other nefarious organizations use real estate as a way to hold their capital in a secure, diverse set of holdings, which brings us to Dubai. And this is another thing that is driving the Anthropocene, driving planetary transformation by human activity. Dubai is in a desert. It is not an attractive place to live. The land is not worth a lot. But yet each of these towers is about as tall as the tallest 3 buildings in Boston, where land is valuable, where people do commute in, or at least used to in the before times. And each of these towers represents a separate, distinct investment. And the height of the tower is proportional to the amount of money that any single investor is interested in parking in real estate. And so there are 60 to 80 story chunks of money that need to be converted into real estate. And then what happened famously is that the Sovereign Wealth Fund of one of the Emirates was much larger than could be held in a 60 to 80 story building. And so we have the Burj Khalifa. It is not the tallest building in the world because of market demand for whatever is supposed to happen in this building. It's not the tallest building in the world just to be the tallest building in the world. It is the tallest building in the world because that is the size of the sovereign wealth fund that it needed to house. And this brings us to this overarching uber point that there is this relationship between architectural projects, the systems that that architectural project is the instrument of, and the larger culture that either drives the system or that results from the system itself. So this is a set of reflexive relationships. It's like the chicken and the egg. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the system or the culture or the architectural project? So this is both a diagram of how huge the forces are that are involved in every architectural project and the futility of thinking that architecture could have any impact on these larger things. But at the same time, it is also very optimistic that given the fact that an architectural project is the instrumentation of a system, that an architectural project conceived and produced within this consciousness is capable of driving systematic change. And that is another lecture that I give about Medellin, Colombia, where exactly that, what strategy was employed. But we don't have time for that. In the meantime, we are looking at the instrumental operation of this architecture. In order to protect the investment value of the real estate of Dubai, the government has forbidden anyone from disclosing the vacancy rate of these buildings. When asked, what is the vacancy rate? The person responding is legally obligated to say what the ownership rate is. And the ownership rate, because it's an investment, is quite high, much higher than the actual occupancy rate. And so we have these ritual renewals of confidence in the real estate value. This is a famous building. This ritual renewal every new year of the building through fireworks as a platform for fireworks is a way to ensure the investment community that this building promises dependably to be as valuable or more valuable 10 years from now as it is now. The primary purpose of this building is to retain its value. That is the purpose of this architecture. This is what is driving to a large extent the Anthropocene. It is not just the familiar extraction, the imperative to extract wealth that we saw throughout the period of colonialism that is very familiar to us in the study of colonialism in Southeast Asia. Now it is beyond extraction. It is also the promise of financial return. So this is the financialization of extraction on top of it. So this is a very powerful visualization of the story of the Anthropocene. It's a video I recommend the sound, listening to it with the sound. It starts around the time of the Industrial Revolution, when the human population reached about 1 billion people. It took another 120 years for the human population to reach 2 billion. And then around 1950, two things happened. The rate of population growth suddenly accelerated dramatically in an unprecedented rate. We were adding 1 billion people to the human population every 30 years, then every 20 years, and now every 15 years or so. Heading quickly from 1 billion around the time of the Industrial Revolution to the expected peak of around between 10 and 12 billion people on the planet. But wait, there's more. It turns out that the impact on the planet is not just the number of consumers, but you have to multiply that by the average per capita rate of consumption. And as fast as the human population has been accelerating, the rate of consumption has been accelerating even more greatly. And so we have this very rich capacity to model the planet just in time to witness and take the measure of the full impacts that are being wrought on the planet by human activity, coordinated by this global consensus of wealth extraction and financial speculation. Again, the wealth extraction is the thing that's actually despoiling the planet through mining and dumping. But there's a multiplier effect, an economic multiplier, which is the speculation. So if the global economy is in the realm of $53 trillion a year, the financial speculation economy might be 150 trillion or 200 trillion. It's difficult to estimate. And so we talked about population. This is what it looks like if you step back and look at the human population since the dawn of the agricultural revolution. In the blink of an eye, during many of our lifetimes, it has gone from something that the planet could sustain in terms of numbers and per capita consumption to something that we now need to design for. The design condition of architecture in the 21st century should be, we simply round off to 10 billion. And now it's the role of architects thinking in terms of systems. How do we manage the resources through the instrumentation of architecture to reduce the per capita consumption so that the planet can sustain 10 billion people? No problem, right? Buckminster Fuller famously started this process in the 1980s with his World Game. And since then, architects have been using computers to do something very similar. I'm not sure if Vinnie Mas is aware of Buckminster Fuller. I suspect he is. But he's been working with his colleagues to develop computer modeling that tests out extreme scenarios. What would happen if we only invest in defending coastlines? And let's test the outcome by global population redistribution. Or let's test the outcome in terms of economic measures like GDP. And the big one is how much carbon gets released into the atmosphere. That's the one everybody has their eyes on. And so you can run these models over and over and test out different scenarios. But the question is, as we look at these new computer models that come out of methods of architectural speculation, the question is, are these computer models that are showing us the different possible outcomes of this bold experiment in planetary management, are these computer models capable of enough sophistication to balance the hundreds of different parameters that is not the purview of any government? There is no global government managing 5-year plans for humanity. So is there a sophistication that we can develop using computers that would allow us to manage these common resource pools? No matter how many times we model things and compare these models, it's not clear that we are going to do any better than the Green Revolution did during their experiments in Bali in the 1980s. So it's quite sobering. As great as computers are, thank you, computer, for allowing us to connect on Zoom today. But I'm still sticking with my paper and pencil when it comes to architecture as much as possible. I'm still waiting for the moment when I can draw on my screen and develop a three-dimensional model. So I'm a little skeptical of how quickly computers are catching up. Which brings us to the fifth and final in the last few minutes I have here, to quickly run through some interesting things that about 60 years after the Dutch architects were going through the villages of Indonesia and learning about bamboo preservation methods, the secrets of salt soaking gets lost in the craziness of modern development of the 20th century, only to be rediscovered, quote unquote, when Irish designer Linda Garland teamed up with a series of German and Dutch scientists to develop these techniques as if for the first time, and then not just create beautiful repurposing of pre-colonial forms for luxury estates. People like Richard Branson and David Bowie, she is their designer of bamboo architecture. But she also publishes this comic book teaching anyone who wants to, translates it to multiple languages. Anyone who wants to learn how to preserve bamboo can do so. So there's these two fronts, the luxury market of bamboo aesthetic housing and luxury estates, and empowerment of people to do this for themselves. The Green School in Bali uses the amazing capacity of bamboo, and then John and Cynthia Hardy do the Green School, and John Hardy's daughter, Alora Hardy, you can tell from this sketch, she has a background in fashion design, not architecture, which is in part responsible for her being liberated from the computer tyranny of architecture, education, and culture to sketch, model, mock up things at full scale, and then build it using the model as the template. And so skipping the whole part about computers and drawings and all of that. And just in case there's any doubt, Alora Hardy and Ibuku are targeting the luxury side of the bamboo market globally, not just the wealthiest 1%, but really the wealthiest 100th of a percent. And so what about everybody else? Well, fortunately, there are other architects who are working with bamboo who are able to balance this development, these two branches of the bamboo revolution. One is a decidedly luxury market. The other is targeting the challenge of empowering people to grow their own houses, using Simon Velez's of Colombia, using the title of his book. And of course, our own Eko Prawoto and his work. Similarly, he is producing some of the most gorgeous bamboo architecture anyone has ever seen, while simultaneously empowering people to build their own structures quickly, build it themselves as a way to reverse the deliberate, wasn't so deliberate, but the impoverishment of the majority of people by removing access to the ability to build their own houses, to participate in a social Sambatan culture that preserves both the physical and non-physical capacity of large populations to build for themselves. And then the final branch, the final bit of evidence of this branch is Linda Garland's son, Arif Rabik, who has kind of left behind the aesthetic aspects of bamboo, or at least he doesn't emphasize that. He emphasizes the potential for bamboo to sequester 1 billion of the 40 billion tons of carbon we put into the atmosphere each year. This is a very ambitious young man who is very credibly taking on the task of not just sequestering carbon, but also empowering villages by giving them access to an income stream being drawn out of their forests, and a very interesting, provocative proposal to first produce 1,000 bamboo villages in Indonesia, then replicate it in 9 other countries around the tropical world. And so this is really an exemplary of the challenges that face us moving forward. This is not just about the aesthetics of architecture, but architecture as the instrumentization of systems and cultures, then should not just be on the receiving end of that reflexive relationship, but also we should embrace our capacity as designers to create systems out of our architectural proposals that have transformative impacts by opening up new possibilities that people would otherwise not see. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, exactly. 40 minutes. Thank you very much, Bob. Rekan-rekan sekalian, kita sekarang akan dengar tanggapan dari Ibu Indah Widyastuti. Silakan Bu Indah. Waktunya Anda. Tolong hidupkan mic-nya. Sebelum Bu Indah mulai, mungkin ini kok isi yang disampaikan oleh Bob itu mungkin cukup banyak. Jadi mohon para peserta bisa merenungkan dulu, baru nanti ajukan pertanyaan. Bu Indah, mic-nya tolong dihidupkan.
Indah freeze kelihatannya itu.
Oh, wah
Freeze.
celaka.
Ya.
Kelihatannya sudah mau mulai Bu Indah, Anda ada di mana ini?
Sepertinya putus itu.
Waduh, gawat ini. Karena tidak ada yang bisa menggantikan Bu Indah, sementara gini, daripada kita kehilangan waktu, saya mungkin bisa anukan sedikit ke Bob ya. Ini pertanyaan ringan, Bob.
Oke.
Apa tanggapan Anda terhadap perpindahan ibu kota Indonesia?
Ringan? Really? You're going to ask me that? What was that? Okay. Well, the short answer is I don't know. The slightly longer answer is I wonder, given my research and my research questions from 20 years ago, regardless of the original intentions of moving the capital, how much of this in the end is likely to end up being simply another opportunity to harvest vast quantities of money as the value of the land goes from the agricultural value, or it doesn't even, most of this land doesn't even have agricultural value because it's not cleared, to all of a sudden becoming some of the most valuable land in Southeast Asia. Who's benefiting from that increase in value? I think that's a crucial question to ask moving forward. Second question being, what do we do with Jakarta? We still need to save Jakarta. Jakarta is not going anywhere. the government is not the most important thing happening in Jakarta. So I turn it back to you all, those questions, and good luck with that. I look on with fascination and how this all plays out.
At least COVID-19 kills the idea anyway.
Not for long. These ideas, we've been looking at these ideas for decades. The Dutch wanted to move the capital to Surabaya in the 19th century. Sukarno wanted to move the capital. Suharto wanted to move the capital outside of Jakarta to the watershed area that two of his sons had used as the basis for the largest private real estate development in Indonesia. And the moving of the capital to Jonggol area was very much a part and parcel of a strategy of real estate, harvesting the exchange value in real estate speculation. So I don't see why this would not be either the same or even bigger.
Menarik sekali. Jadi kalau saya biasanya suka cari apa yang tersembunyi di belakang maksud itu.
Ya.
Siapa yang punya interest?
Ya.
Ya. Untuk apa dan untuk siapa? Sebetulnya itu pertanyaan dasar.
Ya, siapa yang untung?
Ya. Tapi ya memang daripada teriak-teriak di luar, saya jadi juri juga.
I hope you're getting some money out of it. You got it. Architects are going to get their piece. Architects are right there. Look at Dubai. Architects are part of this system. Yeah. What do we want to do about it?
Oke, apakah Bu Indah sudah terkonek lagi? Kalau belum terkonek, mungkin kita masih perlu manfaatkan Bob. Karena yang tadi menurut saya terlalu kaya untuk dicerna oleh semua ya. Karena perspektifnya itu begitu besar. Apa gunanya arsitek kalau tidak ada investor misalnya? Kalau tanpa investor bisa nggak kita menghasilkan sesuatu, Bob?
Yeah, but the investors are looking for opportunities that have viability in the decades to come. In a way, the global pandemic of COVID-19 is a very sobering wake-up call to the investment community that, you know, maybe there are forces operating that threaten the viability of our investments. And maybe the smartest investment is something that can be future-proofed against some of the worst disasters, you know, of coastal sea rise, of you know, just all of mass displacement of populations, and at a certain point, even capitalism, even extractive capitalism, will build a lifeboat for itself. But the problem with extractive capitalism is that it cares about not just goods and services. It counts bads and disservices the same way it counts goods and services. So the key economic factor is time frame. If we continue to use current economic modeling, where there's a 5% expectation on return investment, that means in 20 years, nothing. So we don't consider, in many investment decisions made on our behalf, there is no consideration of year 21. The time horizon is 20 years. And in corporate capitalism, the time horizon is often the next quarter, the next 3 months. So between the next 3 months and the next 20 years, how do we maximize our return on investment? If the investment horizon were shifted to value the long term, we would have even extractive capitalism would change its decision-making criteria and favor investments and be attracted to investment opportunities like the one that the 1,000 Bamboo Villages offers, that has a long-term growth potential that actually protects everybody's investment. And so that's, I guess, I never wanted to study economics.
Selamat malam, apa saya bisa masuk? Aduh.
Oh ya, oke, Bob sudah berhenti. Silakan Bu Indah, tadi kami semua kehilangan Anda itu, mau cari di udara susah. Silakan Bu. Hidupkan mic-nya.
Freeze lagi.
Freeze lagi. Wah, gawat.
Luckily, we have lots of very intelligent questions waiting to be asked.
Nggak apa-apa. ini adalah intermezzo dulu sambil menunggu Bu Indah, karena ini adalah slotnya beliau. Tapi sambil mengisi, kalau beliau keluar, kalau saya tidak mengisi, saya berdosa terhadap Pak Sumur ini, sama Pak Yuswadi, sama Pak Dodo, Pak Alvin tadi. What you don't know was that the government attempted to erase the building permits in order to get a lot of investors. And they brought their proposal to Singapore. And then the Singapore government said, without building permits, there will be no investor in your built environment. So they changed the building permits into certain not permit because they cannot lose space. That's indicate that how stupid the mind of these authorities. Okay, let me see. Pak Bu Indah sudah bisa dikontak belum ya? Waduh, gawat ini, kita mesti banyak
Bu Indah sedang restart komputer, Pak.
ya.
Mungkin sebentar masuk.
Wah, ya, saya tahu dia tadi sudah dibajak sama Real Rich atau siapa itu ya, sampai jam 6. Tapi mungkin capek komputernya. Tapi nggak apa-apa, saya bisa ngobrol sama Bob dulu. Ada di sini banyak tokoh, tapi sambil nunggu Bu Indah. Bob, apakah kalau kita bahas, dengar presentasi Anda ya, kelihatannya kita ini di Indonesia tidak bisa terlepas dari global force.
Betul.
Tidak mungkin. Jadi, apakah membahas arsitektur Indonesia masih relevan?
Thank you. That's such a great question. My answer is it depends. If we're talking about luxury bamboo houses for millionaires, who cares? Just to be blunt. But the question is, if millionaires are commissioning luxury bamboo houses, does that message, I don't know if Apple TV Plus, I don't know what the audience in the villages of the vast archipelago of Indonesia, I don't know how many villages are watching Apple TV Plus and are looking at it's a 10-part series. Episode 3 is focused on Sharma Springs in Abian Samal, Bali. If Apple TV Plus is being watched by thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of villagers throughout the archipelago, then maybe they're going to say, hey, I've got this clump of bamboo out here. Let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can build a house out of bamboo, and maybe it will come back. But I'm skeptical. I don't think so. So then the question is, the three examples I give of Simon Velez in Colombia, who is trying his best to empower real people, people who would otherwise not have a home. They are building their own homes. There are more bamboo buildings in Colombia now because of the work of this architect than in any other place in the world. That's impact. And Eko Prawoto, his work, that is impact. And Arif Rabik and 1,000 Bamboo Villages and the Environmental Bamboo Foundation, that is impact. And if we move beyond bamboo, let's talk about the kampong. If bamboo cannot be used for housing because it's kampungan, until people get over the social stigma of bamboo as being kampungan, how about all the other things that we could be doing to help the situation of the millions of people trapped in poverty, if we can manage to negotiate the cultural transformation, which is what we do ultimately as architects. It's just that we tend to manage the cultural transformation of the wealthiest 1% of the population. If we can instead have an impact on the rest, the majority of people in the world who are trapped in poverty, and they are self-stigmatizing through things like kampungan. What else besides bamboo is available to us to explore if we can simply catalyze and accelerate the process of making that which is stigmatized as being kampungan and elevate it and find new value in it, the way new value has been found in bamboo. What else can we help catalyze to release people from their own imprisonment in these social stigmas associated with the kampung?
Wow, ini perlu ada ahli ilmu sosial untuk bagaimana masalah status itu. Nah, tapi ini mumpung Bob ada di sini dan ada Profesor Dominic, ada Profesor Sato, ini luar biasa nih. Jadi saya mau tanya, apakah dengan COVID ini bukan waktunya kita memikir ulang kapitalisme?
Oh, you're going to ask an architect about economics? Well, I see a question in the chat about this, about architecture and the mandate, the obligation to not just step beyond the boundaries of architecture, but to tear down the barricades that we have erected around architecture. We are increasingly seeing those barricades obliterated, and we step across that line, and architecture has entered the world, and the world has entered architecture. If I can take a moment to illustrate this with a story. When I was 23 years old, I arrived at the Cooper Union in New York City, one of the most prestigious architecture schools in the world at the time, and to study with John Haydock and Peter Eisenman and all the superstars of architecture, and I was thrilled. And after studying many different things in college, I arrived in architecture school. I vividly remember walking through the stacks of the library and looking at the different topics in the library and thinking to myself with great satisfaction, I'm an architect now. I don't need to study this history stuff. I'm an architect now. I don't need to study this economic stuff. I don't need to study geography, anthropology, sociology, political science. Thank God I don't have to worry about any of this stuff. All I need to do is look at these beautiful big picture books and just relax and bathe in the hot tub of gorgeous architectural pictures. I was so relieved. So can I finish this thought?
Biar Bob finish dulu.
Okay.
1-2 menit ya, silakan.
And then a horrible thing happened to me that shook me out of this reality. I arrived in Solo and I looked around and I said, what's up with that? And I looked there and what's going on here? How do you explain this architecture? And in order to account for how this architecture got the way it was, I was so disappointed. I had to study history. I had to study sociology. I had to study economics. And it hasn't stopped. And so it's what we have to do if we care about solving problems in a meaningful way. Okay, thank you.
The key terms meaningful, that's very important. Baik, sekarang kita sudah bisa menyambut Ibu Indah. Silakan Bu Indah, mulai saja.
Ya, baik, terima kasih Pak Gunawan. Maaf, ini tadi begitu dipersilahkan langsung terlempar tadi saya. Entah kenapa. Sebentar Pak ya. Oke, saya share dulu. Ya. Salah. Aduh, astagfirullahaladzim. Sebentar, ini ternyata kelempar juga ini PPT-nya. Saya buka dulu. Kenapa ya?
Tenang saja, Bu.
Sebentar, ini harus saya tutup dulu. Pak Gun, kalau mau dilanjut sebentar ngobrolnya boleh, saya lagi buka PPT ini.
Oke. Kalau begitu saya bisa. Ini mumpung ada Bob nih.
Iya,
jadi,
betul.
Bob, Anda pasti kenal dengan Profesor Tay Keng Soon ya, dari Singapura.
Yes.
Kita tahu bahwa kita dalam proyeksi demografi, orang yang hidup di kota itu akan makin banyak. Apakah tren itu bisa di-reverse karena COVID, saya nggak tahu. Tapi beliau, Tay Keng Soon punya konsep yang namanya rural urbanism, yang menghidupkan kampung sebagai standarnya ditentukan oleh sekolah dan rumah sakit. Itu bisa jadi sebuah center baru yang bisa membuat ekonomi rakyat yang namanya rakyat jelata itu menjual barangnya langsung ke consumer. Tidak usah melewati level-level meminjam konsepnya Jack Ma dan Amazon bisa direct selling. Dengan begitu, gambaran kita terhadap planning kota, meskipun sudah kita tahu bahwa car-based itu mulai ditinggalkan. Tapi kan belum radikal. Dengan ada COVID ini saya kira perlu agak sedikit radikal. Karena kita stay home-nya lebih banyak. Tapi kan tidak semua orang bisa afford itu ya, bisa mendapat itu kemewahan itulah. Nah, menurut Anda bagaimana ini? Apakah ada radical change dalam pemikiran kita terhadap membuat kota, membuat kampung, dan arsitektur kan ikuti itu, nggak bisa arsitek bilang maaf.
So three things. First, I think that the vision of giving rural populations direct access to markets using computer technology information, doing it from the phone, I think that is perfect. That is so important. That is at the heart of Arif Rabik's 1,000 Bamboo Villages, is direct access to global markets from each village cooperative. So that's essential, and it's very important. The second thing is it's important to recognize that often these population shifts are horribly violent acts, that people are being displaced by industrial agriculture or other, real estate development for investment, are being displaced off the land and being pushed into cities. It's much better to pull people into cities than it is to push people into cities. And the third and final point is that cities are not the problem. The problem is not a lot of people in one place. The problem is a lot of people's cars in one place. Cities per capita outperform, well, at least in North America, cities outperform by a factor of 100 the ecological footprint of rural settings. People in rural United States drive and they consume at a much higher level than each person in the city because of the power of shared facilities that is possible in cities. And spatially, the problem in cities is cars and real estate exchange value. When these towers are sold to international cartels who are money laundering, they're trying to buy it for as much money as they can. And when every luxury apartment penthouse sells, everybody's rent in New York City rises a little bit. Every time that price goes up, everybody's rent goes up, and that causes homelessness.
Oke, thank you, Bob. Bu Indah, apakah sudah siap?
Ya, masih ini Pak, sebentar. Udah mulai terbuka. Iya, sudah terbuka. Aduh, sebentar. Ya.
Tapi jangan panik lah.
Ini benar-benar enggak baru kali ini.
Kami tunggu sambil ngobrol sama Bob. Karena ini kesempatan yang sangat jarang. Dan Bob mau penuhi undangan ini sudah suatu keadaan luar biasa buat kami semuanya.
Luar biasa.
Perlu bersyukur ini.
Ya. Mungkin bisa diulangi tiap tahun.
Wah, ini Pak Sumur ini. Bob sudah menyediakan kesempatan. Bagaimana Bu Indah?
Sedang dibuka, sedang terbuka, cuma memang pelan ini filenya kebuka.
Wah,
saya juga sedang mencoba untuk kirim ke ini, ke panitia juga.
Bill Mitchell ini kancingnya terlalu banyak. Jadi susah dibuka.
Iya, ini baru kali ini seumur-umur. Nanti saya sedang mencoba sambil kirim nanti ke Dena. Ya. Oke, sudah terbuka. Sudah,
oke, ya, silakan.
Ya.
Sharing screen.
Ya, sebentar. Ya. Sebentar, mana ini? Aduh, lama banget munculnya. Sebentar, Pak. Ya. Share screen. Kenapa tidak muncul? Aduh, ya Allah. Bentar, Pak, ya. Sudah, ini sudah.
Gina bisa bantu mungkin? Atau Leo?
Sebentar, saya sedang berusaha kirim file juga ke Dena, cuman ini uploadnya lama sekali, saya nggak tahu ini kayaknya sambungan, ada masalah juga dengan sambungan, tapi ini sudah terbuka, Pak. Cuman sekarang saya lagi berusaha untuk share screen, tapi kenapa PPT-nya tidak muncul ya? Kenapa PPT-nya tidak muncul?
Ini host nih, tolong.
Biasanya kan PPT-nya muncul ya di select window ini, tapi kenapa tidak muncul sekarang?
Tadi Bob kan sudah keluar, sudah stop screen.
Ya, sudah. Harusnya bisa ini. Ntar saya lagi berusaha untuk kirim. Aduh, sebentar ya. Jadi panik sendiri nih.
Tenang. Kalau gitu saya ngobrol sama Bob lagi sebentar. Karena saya belum memberikan pertanyaan, karena pertanyaan nanti bisa dikumpulkan bersama-sama Anda dan Bob.
Iya, betul.
Saya.
Iya, Pak.
Jadi
2014 student Unpad.
Wow.
Oke. Saya sudah kirim ke Dena. Coba. Dena saya sudah kirim.
Oke, Dena ada masalah?
Apakah sudah diterima, Dena?
Ke email
iya, ke email tadi.
Ya?
Betul.
Belum saya terima, Bu.
2017-420064 kan ya?
Oh, 64 bukan saya, Pak. 64 Devina.
Ini
sudah
saya, oh ya benar,
katanya.
kalau gitu, iya.
Diterima katanya.
Diterima, oke. Ya mungkin dari situ saja kali ya. Di apa? Dari screen
bisa
share dari
situ
saja.
Share screen. Bisa, Bu?
Ya, alhamdulillah. Iya, oke. Aduh, mohon maaf ini baru kali ini seumur terjadi.
Iya.
Ya, oke. Sebentar saya ini siapkan dulu. Ya. Baik, terima kasih Profesor Gunawan, Profesor Rob Cohort, lalu kemudian teman-teman di LSAI, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Mohon maaf tadi saya begitu dipersilahkan langsung terlempar keluar. Mungkin ada masalah yang koneksi dan sebagainya. Baik, sebelumnya tadi saya berterima kasih sekali kepada Profesor Rob Cohort gitu karena telah memberi banyak pencerahan lewat presentasinya tadi. Walaupun terus terang saya agak sedikit takut juga karena sebetulnya ketika saya diminta untuk menanggapi, saya sebetulnya menanggapi tulisan yang sempat diberikan oleh Profesor Cohort terakhir, Decolonizing Bambu tapi tidak apa-apa, saya rasa itu adalah materi yang sangat padat. Saya adalah sesuatu yang saya banyak belajar dari situ. Hanya mohon maaf kalau saya mungkin di sini akan lebih banyak menguraikan permasalahan bambu. Nah, untuk itu selanjutnya saya izinkan saya menggunakan bahasa Inggris mulai dari sekarang agar mudah bisa diikuti oleh seluas-luasnya pendengar kita. Okay, good evening, audience. Good morning, Professor Cohort. The title of my expositions here is Contemporary Bamboo, Architectures in Indonesia, a Contemporary Indonesian Architecture, or a Global Architectures in Indonesia, in response to Professor Cohort's essay in Decolonizing Bamboo. Indeed, many points of, in these discussions, I may, belum. Many points in my discussions would be in the form of questions, actually. Hopefully, it could invite further elaborations from Professor Cohort and also audience, or hopefully I could, or even clarifications or a comment. Okay, next. So here is some term that I would refer here in this presentation. That Anthropocene is a new planetary epoch over which humankind has acted as a dominating force, exerting demonstrable and profound influence. And decolonization is a long-term process of eliminating colonial heritage in various life, in various fields of life. So this is I will start from this. Oh, next. Sorry, in this area that is it. Next. Okay. Why is it called decolonizations? So after reading the essay of Professor Cowherd, likewise, a nation's bamboo architecture on building traditions based on bamboo apparently also can experience colonizations. Traditionally, bamboo construction is not a foreign tradition in Indonesia. And it could not be separated by many other aspects of life of the Indonesians' traditional life, like paddy farming, and also and then the ethics of gotong royong, mufakat musyawarah, and so on. So all are connected to one another to form building traditions. However, during the colonial era, it was perceived as an unhealthy, this bamboo architecture, unhealthy, uninhabitable, inflammable architectures, and therefore prohibited. In these descriptions, Professor Cowherd described how the ideas of health and hygiene become a sort of modern morality by which the use of bamboo indeed seems to need to be suppressed in order for another construction tradition like brick, wood, and building traditions to occur in the colony. And a century later, the popularity of bamboo re-emerged in Indonesia on the hands of a figure, next, next, such as Linda Garland from Ireland and Simon Veles from Colombia in 1970s and 1980s. Moreover, Moreover, the decolonization is perhaps becoming relevant considering the history of modern bamboo explorations in the world. Also, because it took inspirations from the traditional and vernacular architectures in Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and Latin America, including Indonesia. In other words, the bamboo architecture's knowledge continues to be perceived outside Indonesia, while in Indonesia itself, it came to a process of moving away from it. So that is what happened. And given various different contextual situations and processes already described by Professor Cowherd, hopefully, next, we should put meanings. We could. Oh, sorry. No, not. Belum. Sorry, maaf. So hopefully we could discuss further about how we should put meaning on this decolonization process. I understand the concept of decolonization here as Professor Cowherd specifically took experience from Thomas Karsten, McLean Pond, with Linda Garland as the entry point of the discussions. But as a whole, in reality, is it indeed a decolonization process? Or is it only another new different agenda superimposing the existing building traditions? Next. Next, okay. Oh, and then what is it? Why is it called an Anthropocene? Because the moment of the decolonizations coincides with the widespread concerns over environmental issues. In general, bamboo architectures and bamboo cultivation is considered relevant to respond to bring a more ecological orientations. And as I already mentioned, how the bamboo cultivations cannot be separated from the other aspect of Indonesians, traditional Indonesians life, like agricultures and the way they construct the building, the gotong royong traditions, and then the musyawarah mufakat, even the way they dwell in a big house where a family demonstrate a community, a big community, and then they perform a network with others communities as a whole. And this kind of networks communities is also observable actually in like in Bali also, we have this network of temples, and also in Minangkabau, there is a network of suku or clans, matrilineal clans. And actually since my research is about matrilineal society, and then how the networks really is very complex indeed, and then it performs a holistic forms of society. So the setting of Indonesia is so important, more than just historical precedents, however, of vernacular architectures, but because Indonesia also provides a learning fields of study for the development of the world contemporary bamboo architectures as we see today. It makes me see that the development of contemporary bamboo architecture in Indonesia is actually more than just a state of Indonesian contemporary architectures, but the evolvement of global architectures in Indonesia. Indeed, the idea of ecological importance and reclaiming the well-rooted traditions are strategic sentiments acceptable by the gamut of society, social and global society. But how would it be ways to examine the contributions of contemporary bamboo architectures in responding to the current Anthropocene situations? How could all the efforts that has been done in harnessing contemporary bamboo architectures could replicate or could learn from the complexity life of the traditional society? We'll see together whether our discussion will reach this point. There are several principles that interest me from Professor Cowherd's presentation that I may discuss here. Okay, next. The first principle is that, next, okay. The development of positive response on bamboo constructions is apparently not sufficiently explained through reasoning such as technicalities and even ecological virtues, but through the history of social perceptions and appreciations toward bamboo itself by its society. Okay. Therefore, the discussions should connect to the power force constellations in its context, which can be political, economical, and social. Karsten, McLean Pond, and Linda Garland are three non-native individuals who share similar ideals and social and ecological motive and concerns for local carpentry. From the papers of Professor Cowherd, we could also learn that although they were sincere in promoting positive potential of bamboo, difference in social, economic, and political settings have made them develop in different directions. One is in history of colonialisms. Two of them is in the history of colonialism, while the rest other is in the history of globalization. Next. The experience of bamboo utilizations and bamboo architectural trends in various countries may also vary. From a few that I could understand, next picture. Okay. From the few that I could understand, Colombia has integrated the use of bamboo in their development policies now, including in the provisions of housing. They already had building codes related to bamboo, which has become a global references. China, Vietnam are massively developing their bamboo industry, while Europe is into various academic research and development. Next, the growing trend of bamboo can ever be so in demand in countries that do not have strong bamboo culture, and all is due to strong support from the state. This background should give us reflections about how we could reflexively see the development of bamboo architectures in Indonesia, the contemporary bamboo architecture in Indonesia. Perhaps one important question is how the appreciations of bamboo and the achievements of bamboo architectures in Indonesia can be understood through the social, economic, and political history within Indonesia itself. How do the power play participate in a various scales possibly explain factors that promotes the popularity and the popularity of certain construction material throughout histories. And in this case, we actually need a rigorous cultural strategy because some changes in the society since modernization and colonization may have been quite irreversible. Second, next. The second thing is related to the context of globalizations, where events in a place does not necessarily rely on the local situations. In fact, the development of contemporary bamboo architecture reflects a transnational dynamic. The development of bamboo architecture in Europe, Colombia, China, Vietnam, and later Indonesia may be unique in each of their places. However, at global level, everything is connected to each other and simultaneously form a parallel history and movements. It is bound by several very collective goals, which is surely not only by ecology and environment motive, but also commercial and industrial motive, such as tourism and including architecture. And it seems that Professor Cowherd seems not denying that Linda Garland and Simon Perez praxis also contain both commercial dimensions, orientations, and also a lifestyle dimension, other than its main social and empowerment motive. It is indeed undeniable. The question is, will this global scheme add to the social ecological reality of its participations? Will this growing traditions or global traditions emancipate the richness of cultures which has developed sublimely complex and very supportive to the environment as a whole? We also could not ignore that these global dynamics that are so fast and massive in a country with pluralistic populations, such as Indonesia, possibly yield varying levels of fields of global forces. Maybe there will indeed be those who manage, architects, the bamboo architects, who manage to engage in a global level, while others may only manage regional and national level, or smaller and specified communal sphere, including the vernacular society, who are till date, they are still faithful proceed with their life, with all of their bamboo life all around. Therefore, we could further questions, could the ongoing popularity of contemporary bamboo architecture represent this reality of these layers? The global one, the national, the regional, and then the small communal ones? Or will it be only represent the major, the most popular one, the global one, for instance here? I think this should be a homework for us, especially the Indonesian architecture historian, to scrutinize the development of contemporary bamboo architectures in all layers of the society. Okay, next. The third issue that I learned from many architecture discussion, I may need to recheck it, but I've been in various discussions. There is a paradox, despite of the good improvement or development of contemporary bamboo architectures, that many younger generations actually that not many younger generations who are interested in bamboo crafts. Another factors also show that popularity of contemporary bamboo architects is still very much dominated by architects from different other countries like Latin America, China, and Vietnam. I'm not sure that the problem of ecological awareness, skill, or affinity could explain this lack of interest. In this way, we have to admit that continuous expositions in conferences, workshops, community groups are good in promoting bamboo culture. And also the use of social media is one way to promote the contemporary bamboo architects in Indonesia, as well to spread the affinity to the traditions. The point is that bamboo architectural hotspots in Indonesia are certainly not just about some of particular names like green schools, for instance, or figures like Eko Prawoto, who has been very well known in the area, or Andri Widyo Wijatmoko, or Andri Fitrianto. Although not in a massive scale, there are interactions between many bamboo activists that is spread in villages, in small communities, which may not have a strong drive for promotions or other, but they actively engage in building this bamboo architectures or bamboo crafts, and mostly they are very independent in a sense that they're very independent and not okay, sorry. So belum. So how do we place them, these people, the architects in different layers, on the map of contemporary bamboo architectures in Indonesia? This is yet to include the community that develops on vernacular society, for instance. Okay, next. The fourth, related to the global elaborations on collaborations and communalisms in the context of Anthropocene. It would not wrongly interpret from if I would not wrongly interpret from Professor Cowherd's presentation that the Anthropocenes in the Anthropocene's era, empathies and humilities are needed to correct all forms of disconnections due to the exploitations on the earth of the extractive capitalists. Therefore, he suggests that rather than playing into modernity's trope of rupture, empathy and humility appear to be prerequisite attitudes in Anthropocene. Next, though the popularity of bamboo architectures next. Okay, stop this. Though the popularity of bamboo architecture through the popularity of bamboo architecture, he urged us to reflect whether we will cultivate the goodness of bamboo simply for producing different architecture. Could we do so with the motive of harnessing the environment in order to contribute for achieving more sustainable Earth? Historically, the ethical foundations of global interactions in Southeast Asian society has been embedded in cultures of the pre-colonial period, the global and then also the complex society. But the exploitative development of the capitalistic system with intensive accelerations which occurred in modern era has changed them. And we cannot deny that not all of people have concerns to resume to this old tradition. So this is also one problem. However, the communal and interactive forums in the styles of this communal life, like in the hermitage traditions that is harnessed by the green schools and also many NGOs and activists, seems quite strategic to instill the attachment of the society to bamboo. In India, based on my experience, I stayed in India for more than 5 years. So I saw how the development of local knowledge, such as Vastu, for instance, was accommodated through educational policies, which facilitates alternative educations on local craftsmanship to produce local building experts who are not only reliable, but also have high ethics and spirituality. So the emphasis on the field practice and also the emphasis on the interactions in these educations really develop not only the skills, but also the personalities of the students, which are more or less prepared to be in interactions with the environment and to deal with it and then a struggle for it. And then until now, this kind of Vastus hermitans is becoming learning facilities that finally not only attracted local students, but also foreigners in affordable prices. So this is also how the state, the government, they supported with policies that support this development of the ethics in their policies. Therefore, the key might be if there is a yet political will to support the popularity of bamboo in all dimensions of society, including educations and also ways of life. Okay, next. There is no doubt that in practice, in practical levels, contemporary bamboo architectures offer innovations, new vocabularies, and design solutions, which is beneficial for and relate to contemporary situations. Paradigmatically, it contributes fresh ways to working with natures and communities and opening many opportunities. And for lots of stakeholders in participation to connect in design process. And surely because it contributes new ways of involvement and approaches for sustainable development in creative ways. The advance of digital media in a way could also coalesce with the form plays that essentialize non-Cartesian geometry and also many other computational aspects, which also not only working in designs, but also in social in a social way. Nevertheless, historical events in the contemporary world, nevertheless, as historical events in the contemporary world, the narrative development of bamboo architectures needs to be continuously scrutinized. Next. Now allow me to widen this discussion to the decolonizations a bit. Apart from the popularity, there are also factors that lead to cause unpopularity of bamboo constructions. For For example, in general, we are still dealing with several facts like cheap and practical is still the motive in architectural consumptions of most people in Indonesia. The stigma of bamboo as a material that represents poverty and unhygienic health still persists till now. And therefore, it is yet to be a common option. People in general still prefer cements, bricks, and wood, which are incidentally in accordance to the availability of cement industry in Indonesia, as well as paint color, which is easily availed in market. And a lot of policies which govern the plantations, like these palm plantations, illegal loggings, is also the proof that bamboo, the interventions of bamboo still need a lot of works to come up to surface in the policies or social life of the Indonesians. This fact actually what made me wonder if the decolonizations have really reached the problem of the local level. It may have work in global levels, in the global practices in many places, but has it touched the real situations in the practice, the architectural practice and life of the Indonesians? But I'm yet to sure about the situation in general in Indonesia. So we may discuss this further. Okay, next. I'll close my discussions with some questions for further discussion. Sorry, next. Okay. Bamboo architectures was popular in pre-colonial times in vernacular architecture, which later experienced experience depopulations in the colonial and modern era. Depopularization, sorry, not depopulation. However, it was referred in various architecture studies in 1950s and 80s by many scientists and emerged in new formats as a global trend in 2000s. And now Indonesia is one of the hotspots for the global contemporary architecture movements. Green schools plays a very very important roles here in harnessing this tradition. However, does this colonization really reflect Indonesian architecture or global architectures in Indonesia? Here I try to quote one from the Thousand Plateaus, taken by Deleuze Guattari, and even he also see that there are there is a prospects, there is a future, there is a possibility that we could actually develop a new ways of understanding, a new ways of learning, a new ways of understanding social life, which he determined it should be learned from the Pacific island. So I think this is a kind of a complex system also, actually, from which we can actually gain a model of the social model, of learning models, by which actually we can try to emancipate all of this tradition which has been forgotten. Okay, next. Some tendencies show that the main figures of contemporary bamboos recognized by the world include only few Indonesian architects. What could we reflect back from this condition? And especially in order to take lesson learned from the history of Indonesian architecture. It's quite ironic because we have these traditions in Indonesia particularly, but only few which is recognized, while in many biennales, in many exhibitions, Most of the architects came from China, from Vietnam, and then from Latin America. Only few that comes from Indonesia. What kind of reflection that we can do from here? Okay, Mike. To meet its development, okay, do Indonesian bamboo architects hold their authority in this atmosphere of global collaborations or competition, at least in their own nations? To meet the development of contemporary bamboo architectures in Indonesia, also representations of how globalization works in Indonesian architecture. Therefore, how we can interpret decolonization in the era of globalizations. I mean, what is decolonization in a global situation? If there are only few Indonesian architects who are able to manifest themselves in the global stage of bamboo architecture, would it imply decolonization? Would it imply decolonizations? What lesson learned could we take from the history of Indonesian, for the history of Indonesian architectures, from the reality of the practice of bamboo, from the activities of the Indonesian bamboo architects, and also the events of contemporary bamboo architectures which exist in Indonesia? Next. Furthermore, we are yet to properly discuss about what creativity is for the contemporary bamboo architectures and whether it is the same for the older traditions with the contemporary one. I'm drawing these questions because Indonesian is still important in discussions of Indonesian architectures. How can these traditions relate to one another? Thank you very much. Okay.
Oke, Bu Indah bisa keluar dari screen.
Ya.
Baik, para hadirin, rekan-rekan saya yang saya hormati, kita telah mendengar dua buah penyajian yang cukup berat. Dari Bu Indah itu elaborasi terhadap masalah bambu ya, dan mempertanyakan decolonization. Tapi sebagian beliau mengakhiri sajiannya dalam bentuk pertanyaan. Pertanyaan-pertanyaan itu saya kira dia alamatkan ke Bob barangkali. Apakah saya akan memberi kesempatan pertama pada Bob untuk dulu respon. Setelah itu baru saya akan melihat beberapa pertanyaan ya. Tidak semua saya kira bisa diajukan. Perlu ingat bahwa kita di sini tidak lagi membahas hal-hal yang terlalu teknis. Yang praktikal memang penting, tapi bukan berarti tidak. Suatu nanti akan saya seleksi beberapa pertanyaan, tentu penuh dengan bias saya ya. Jadi jangan heran nanti. Silakan Bob duluan.
Am I unmuted? Okay. Wow. How to respond? I'm also looking at all the great questions in the chat, and I hope that the committee can find a way to allow these excellent questions and my responses to be shared more widely, so that no one gets left out of the discussion. I'm very grateful that there's so much excellent response to this topic, and it gives me great hope. And really, before I respond very quickly, as I can, I want to say that this is quite humbling for me, in that the answer to most questions is, I don't know, but these are good questions, and I feel obligated to be engaged. I wake up in the morning, and these are the questions that interest me, even when these questions have no hope of being satisfactorily answered, or any much less responded to in terms of action on the ground. what do? You have to engage because all of these questions are too important not to engage them regardless of any chance of success, given the scale of forces. Okay, so I have restructured the points that Winda has so generously offered, and I have organized it very differently than the questions themselves, so forgive me. I again have 5 specific points to make in response, starting with the final one about globalization. It's fascinating to see in our discussions in the past few years, at least the conversations I'm engaged in, the question of globalization has really fallen by the wayside. Me and my colleagues, we don't talk about globalization anymore because the term globalization, embedded in the term globalization, is a false premise that we are becoming more globally connected. Well, there is a power dynamic driving the specific character of those connections. And so in the shortest possible way, I recommend, and I think that this talk has demonstrated this, that instead of aiding and abetting the crime that is the acceptance of globalization, we wake up and open our eyes and we see the power dynamics. And to a large extent, the term that has pushed aside the term globalization is the focused project of decolonization. Which brings us to the second point, that decolonization has not even begun, really. So it's too soon to ask, how are we doing? Maybe it hasn't quite reached Indonesia yet. It hasn't reached anyone yet. We are in the very beginning of struggling and helping each other as much as possible to see the ongoing power structure of colonialism as it has taken on the costume and the appearance of the forces of market capitalism. So much of this talk has been about the oppressive forces of extractive capitalism. There are other flavors of capitalism that are liberating, that are more liberating than the extractive capitalism that we are referring to. Similar to the term globalization, when we say capitalism without modifying it, we are at risk of falling into the trap of assuming this is the only flavor of capitalism available to us. It is not. This is extractive, monopoly, financialized, oppressive, colonial capitalism that has adopted a new costume, but it is an ongoing project of colonial oppression, whether we're talking about Indonesia or we're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States and globally. And part of that is that, are these questions, getting specific. So Pont and Karsten saw themselves as part of the problem and part of the solution. And they spoke of themselves as being placeholders very, very temporarily until the movement gets up and running and they can be pushed aside and the revolution for sharing of power can take place in a more meaningful way. And they saw every time a concrete block is stacked on top of a concrete block, that is an instrument of oppression, of embracing the oppressive economics of commodities. You need cash to buy those materials. And in contrast, they said in the kampongs and in the villages, every time a pole of bamboo is lashed to another pole, every time a piece of alang grass is affixed as atap, that is an act of revolution, especially if it occurs in the context of the social renewal of a Sambatan set of social practice, the spatial social conditions of that Sambatan culture. And then the question that I think is one of the threads that runs through some of the questions on the chat. Is it possible that we can rebuild things like the Subak and then benefit and then actually supercharge it, or actually benefit from the fact that we have these powerful computational models, we have computers, we have social media, we are interconnected across the planet in ways we've never imagined previously. Can those things actually help us not just restore complex adaptive systems to our world in the last moments before things fall apart? Can we reverse the global climate change crisis by investing more in these complex adaptive systems like the Subak, like the Sambatan culture associated with these organic materials? I don't know. It's a similar question. I used to speak, as I did today, about not everything about the kampong is bad. And after an hour talk or something, the questions from the audience would be something like, are you saying that there are things in the kampong that are not bad? You know, it was just anathema. So at a certain point I gave up. I live in a co-housing community, which is a fancy Western reproduction to meet the needs of human society, to engage with neighbors, to work together, to share. We have work days. It's a lot like Sambatan. We share meals. One person cooks the food. I come and eat. Next time I cook the food and they come and eat. It's a lot like Kampungan traditions, kampung traditions. But when I present it in the fancy, shiny costume of this is what we do in the United States, all of a sudden it becomes attractive. To what extent are these bamboo mansions similarly a kind of Trojan horse to achieve ultimately what we wish we could do more directly? Is let's stop self-stigmatizing these traditions and liberate ourselves and see it as part of a decolonizing process. And then I think this is my final point about the culture of architecture, the culture of architects and power. Will these things reach the majority? I think we have to be careful about the use of popular. I think this is a bit flipped. I would encourage us all to consider TV shows about the handful of families that live in fancy architecture. Maybe that media is popular. It's popular media, but it's not popular housing. It's not popular practices. A true popular practice is what we see emerging in Colombia, the very beginning of it, where people actually, when they want a house, they build a house because they have the book, Grow Your House. So I think, and this gets to those of us who are engaged in one way or another with the education of architecture, of architects, whether we are students or professors, so much depends on the professors helping to reduce the cachet, to reduce the currency, to reduce the celebrity status of Rem Koolhaas, of these star architects, even including the star architecture of bamboo, and get out of the way, in a way, and allow the students themselves to take the lead. When I introduce myself to a new class, I say my name is Professor Robert Cowherd. I am number 4. I am not the most important source of understanding of the world. The world itself is your most important source of understanding. Number 2 are the insights that come to us through the practice of architecture. Number 3 are your colleagues, the students. On a good day, I'm number 4. I'm just there to back you up. And what I've seen happen over the last few decades, despite the determination of several of my older white male colleagues to reproduce over and over again the way we were taught back at Cooper Union in the Star Architect system, no matter how hard they try to instill the next generation with the same traumatic, destructive culture of star architecture that we came up through, the students are having none of it. Thank God. The students are the one who are taking control. They are taking the leadership position, and they will not allow the faculty to rebuild and reproduce those barricades around the field of architecture. They have torn down those barricades, and they're not going to allow those barricades to go back up. When they get a chance to design their own thesis projects and do the work that they want to do, they ignore the star architecture economy of the old 20th century culture. They go out into the world. They learn about healthcare. They learn about early childhood education. They learn about poverty alleviation. They learn about race and segregation. And they are unproblematically, they are totally comfortable looking at real problems, economic problems, social problems, and using the powerful tools of architecture, design, urban form to empower populations to solve those problems themselves. It's a collaboration with the thousands of clients that live in conditions of poverty. And so their clients are not David Bowie or Richard Branson or Tom Brady, and however you say the name of his supermodel wife. Those are not the clients of this generation of students. The majority is increasingly the target audience for the work of the next generation, and rightfully so. How could it be otherwise, given the challenges that these young people are facing as they come of age and inherit a world that has been devastated by people who look and act like me. I tell them, you should be very angry with my generation because of what we have handed off to you as your inheritance. But as an ambassador from that generation, I'm here to acknowledge that we owe you reparations, and anything we can do to help, we're here, but you should take anything we have to say with a grain of salt. Good luck. One piece of advice, look at what we did and try doing the exact opposite of what we did and see if that works, just as a starting point. So talk about revolution. I think that revolution is the only alternative.
Ibu-ibu dan Bapak, ini jangan kaget bahwa ada jawaban yang saya tidak tahu tadi. Ini biasa di dalam akademik, di luar Indonesia, dosen tuh boleh aja menjawab, saya tidak tahu, tapi coba kita sama-sama mencari jawaban. Dosen, profesor bukan orang yang paling tahu. Tadi Bob kan mengatakan dia adalah yang keempat malahan. Apa artinya ini? Benarkah sikap kita sebagai arsitek memang mau jadi star architect? Padahal ya. Ada ego yang besar. Jadi Anda mendesain untuk orang, design for, atau you mau design with. Yang tadi Bob katakan tuh lebih banyak ke design with the community yang ada ininya. Nah ini saya coba bantu sedikit. Ada satu pertanyaan untuk Bu Indah dari Bu Titin tadi ya. Bu Titin, okay. Silakan.
Okay. That the use of bamboo building, Do you think that the use of bamboo in buildings is an act of decolonizing? Okay. Ibu Tutin, thank you for the questions. Yeah, actually, this is the questions that I also try to find the answers. But Professor Cowherd already stated at the end of the discussions that the revolution should start from ourselves. So there's do you think that the use of bamboo in building is itself an act of decolonizing architectures because the conventional building regulations exclude bamboo building as they are considered temporary structure? Yeah, personally it can be. Personally, it is a start. The thing is that what is the motive when they are using this bamboo? Because as already explained very deep by Professor Cowherd, that when we are talking about Anthropocenes and we are talking about how we take part in shaping this earth. So what's the motive? Whether it is only a decorations or is there any other motive? I think this is a kind of determinations that can even start from the way we throw trash, for instance, when we put everything in order. So I think this is the point. So I could not say whether it is a decolonizing process. I can only say it is possible, because at the end it depends on the motive of building this bamboo. But indeed, everything should start from how an awareness then trigger a certain act, and perhaps one of the act is building with bamboo. I'm not sure if this is sufficiently answer Pak Gunawan, but I'm trying to reply.
Saya bukan Ibu Tutin loh, jadi saya
Pak Gunawan, saya kembalikan kepada moderator.
Oh, ya. Ibu-ibu dan Bapak, sebetulnya kita sudah melampaui waktu yang disediakan. Saya mau tanya panitia, berapa banyak waktu lagi yang bisa diberikan untuk ini, atau kita harus stop?
Silakan, menurut Pak Gun saja.
Waduh,
sepertinya.
Kalau semau saya nanti tunggu sampai tidur, apalagi kalau semau Pak Sumur ini. Tapi oke lah, saya kira karena ini namanya mumpung ya. Bob kan tahu betul istilah mumpung. Mumpung ada Bob, ada Bu Indah, dan ada Pak. Nanti yang show up belakangan akan ada Pak Koji Sato juga ya. Kita sabar saja menunggu gilirannya. Tapi ada beberapa yang saya kira lumayan menarik. Yang ada pertanyaan tentang ini architecture education sama architecture research. Ini Pak Budian Nastas. Saya persilakan Pak sampaikan, tapi pertanyaannya yang disampaikan, jangan ada elaborasi lain. Dia mengatakan gini, how architecture education and architecture research can effectively relate to other discipline to really have an impactful outcome. Ini kepada Bob.
Well, I feel that I addressed this in my response because I saw it come in. Thank you very much for this excellent question. My story about walking through the library and having a sense of relief that I don't need to know about any of these other things was shattered by my stepping out into the world, specifically the kampong of Solo and the Kraton of Solo and the streets of Jakarta, in order to figure out how the world got this way. architecturally and urbanistically and otherwise, you cannot afford to avoid these forces. And so reluctantly, but thankfully, I feel obligated to go where the question leads. This is a fundamental, it's more than a research question. It is personal. Like, how did this happen? How did we get to this situation? I had faith that the system behavior of human institutions would self-correct at some point, that there must be some adults somewhere who can be responsible and respond and prevent these horrible things from happening. But it's only by going into economics that you come to the shocking realization that our economic system counts dollars. It counts not just goods and services, but bads and disservices. Goods and bads count the same, whether I am having a positive impact on the world or a negative impact on the world. It only counts impact. So the more I mine out of the ground, the more I pump into the atmosphere, the more plastic that I dump into the ocean, the more money I make. Thank you very much. I win. Whoever destroys the planet the most, the fastest, wins the game. At a certain point, when you see the rules of the game are written the way they are, the responsible thing to do is to question the rules. What if we rewrote the rules? What if we wrote the rules the reverse of they are now, such that if you are causing harm to the planet or to other people, you get less money, not more. And once you do that, you have reversed the machine to produce different outcomes. As long as we keep the rules that we have, it is the definition of insanity to expect outcomes that are different than the outcomes we've been experiencing since the Great Acceleration, at least since 1950. So thank you for that question.
Wow. Jadi saya membantu sedikit mengelaborasi sedikit ya, bahwa ada yang tersembunyi di dalam penjelasan Bob, yaitu sesungguhnya Anda sebagai arsitek, Anda pasti sebagai seorang yang mendesain. Ya, kita sebut itu architectural design. Ya. Tapi jangan lupa, desain itu ada beban moral. Anda tidak bisa membuat sengsara objek yang Anda desain. Jadi desain itu bukan Anda should do that, but Anda ought to be that thing. Jadi ada panggilan hati. Kalau Anda tidak punya panggilan hati, nah ini masalahnya. Anda jadi terkolonisasi oleh uang. Ada panggilannya. Jadi makanya ini dekolonisasi itu baru mulai, belum terjadi benar. Nah, oke. Ibu-ibu, nah, Pak, saya kira kalau kita lanjutkan terus, ini bisa sampai tengah malam, nggak akan selesai. Karena topik ini luar biasa menarik, dan kita di sini tidak mencari right or wrong answer, jangan lupa. Tidak mungkin kita dapat right or wrong according to whom, right or wrong according to what. Dan yang baik itu berubah. Dulu perbudakan itu diizinkan di Yunani. Itu zamannya polis ya. Sekarang nggak ada yang mau ngaku perbudakan itu baik, itu malu dia. Jadi peliharalah rasa malu juga. You kalau melakukan sesuatu yang merusak atau apa, you malu. Gitu. Tapi di Indonesia memang malu itu sudah makin terkikis. Jadi muka saya itu merah terus, nggak pernah apa bisa merah atau putih terus ya. Ini menurut saya ada hal yang jauh ke depan yang. Tapi begini, kita perlu anggap yang hadir di sini, Profesor Bob Cowherd, dan Dr. Indah Widyastuti itu adalah resource person yang bisa membantu kita. Tapi saya kira Bob sama Bu Indah masih terbuka untuk dikontak ya.
Ya.
Untuk nanti buat karena kita nggak bisa di acara ini loh. Acara ini nanti membebankan Pak Alwin, meskipun tadi dia bilang boleh tergantung saya, tapi kan saya harus tahu diri dong, malu dong. Ini nanti bebannya kan ke Unpar ini. Jadi saya kira saya berterima kasih sekali pada semua yang hadir di sini. Memang ada banyak pertanyaan Bu Yulia juga menarik soal kapitalisme dan segala macam. Tapi saya kira nanti diadres ke Bob saja. Yang hadir di sini memang sebagian mungkin tertarik tentang itu, tapi sebagian tidak. Ya ini susahnya. Dan saya sebagai penyelaras tidak mungkin bisa menenangkan semua pihak. Begitu juga mungkin Bob, Bu Indah, tidak mungkinlah kami ini bisa membuat semua orang puas, nggak mungkin. Lalu simpan saja, tapi coba sekarang tadi sudah didemonstrasikan oleh Profesor Cowherd dan Bu Indah, bagaimana mengubah informasi yang begitu banyak yang bisa kalian cari untuk dapat jawaban ke menjadi knowledge. Informasi dia bisa aja tetap informasi, tapi dia tidak jadi knowledge. Tapi tadi sudah didemonstrasikan, ya, bagaimana kita nanti bisa meng-acquire the knowledge dari informasi itu. Jadi saya ucapkan banyak terima kasih dan mohon maaf karena tidak bisa memuaskan semua pihak, dan kita mungkin akan berjumpa pada sesi-sesi berikut ya, setiap minggu ini. Semoga kalian tidak bosan dan informasi yang kalian terima akan banyak sekali. Seberapa banyak yang nanti kalian terima itu bisa jadi knowledge, itu terserah kapasitasnya. Dan saya ucapkan terima kasih pada Bob. Ya, sekarang kita jauh begini saja sama Bu Indah.
Iya, terima kasih Pak Gun.
Pak Sutirso yang ada di,
thank you very much.
Yang ada di saya, Profesor Dominic, lalu Profesor Sato.
Iya, Profesor Dominic, thank you.
Yang sudah hadir ya. Oke, ya semuanya saya ucapkan dan saya kembalikan ke panitia sekarang.
Terima kasih. Terima kasih para pembicara dan moderator. Terima kasih juga atas peran serta Bapak Ibu dan saudara-saudari sekalian. Sekali lagi kami akan mengingatkan bagi para peserta yang membutuhkan e-sertifikat dapat mengisi Google Form yang tertera pada Zoom chat ini. Tak lupa juga kami ingatkan bahwa bagian kedua rangkaian kuliah daring penjelajahan menuju arsitektur Indonesia akan diselenggarakan pada hari Sabtu, tanggal 3 Oktober 2020 pada pukul 3 siang waktu Indonesia bagian Barat, yang akan menghadirkan Bapak Lai Chi-Kian dengan judul Seeing and Using Southeast Asian Theories and Experiment. Kami harapkan kehadiran Bapak Ibu sekalian pada acara tersebut. Selamat malam dan selamat bertemu kembali.
Tidak ada foto dulu.
Oh iya, harusnya ada
ini
foto.
Muka-muka ini kan langka nih.
Virtual.
Mohon maaf Pak Gun, tadi agak sedikit rusak.
Oh ya.
Mungkin kita beri kesempatan untuk bicara sendiri.
Ada tadi saya lihat.
Sekian. Would you please? You still there?
Mau bicara dengan saya dia tadi.
Yes.
Please give a word or two to us.
Me?
Yes,
what
sure.
Fine. Well, I've not much to say. I'm an audience. It was very interesting to listen. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much for inviting me to be present. That's all I can say. It was very nice, interesting, important subject. Yeah.
Sure. We wait for your next book. We wait for your next book.
Yeah, thank you.
You
yes,
promised
I'm
me.
Working on one. I'm working for one, but in my age, you never know how it ends. Yes. Thank you for
Thank you.
thinking of me. Yes, and all the best to everybody. I thank to Indonesia actually, because working on that book was one of the best times of my life. I enjoyed very much. And I very much enjoyed Indonesian architecture. I think it's absolutely unique, the traditional Indonesian architecture, and is very important as a part in the history of architecture, of world architecture, because this type of wooden architecture doesn't exist anywhere in the world in the same way. And it is very important to understand maybe old stone architecture, because often the wooden architecture was transformed into stone architecture, like in Egypt or particularly in Greece, for instance, and we still don't know why, how. We know nothing about what was before the stone in Greece, ancient Greece. No one knows what was before the stone. But if we know about what happens in Indonesia or what happened in Indonesia over the last centuries, you understand much more. And in that sense, I think it's very important for world architecture, historically, for the history of world architecture. That's actually my main point.
Yeah, glad to hear that. Thank you
but personally, it was a great experience for me. Also Indonesia, my time in Indonesia and all that. Very precious for me. So I'm glad to be here and to have listened to these talks. Thank you.
Are we.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
Sudah
Oke, Devina.
Boleh saya